So let's get more perspective on the security situation in the country and try to examine the intervention and concerns of the National Assembly over the rising wave of insecurity in the country. We're now being joined live from our Abuja studio by Senator Emmanuel Okajev, a member of the Nigerian Senate, and Mr. Shehu Mohammed, the Director of Strategic Planning, Buhari Campaign Council during the 2019 elections. Good afternoon, gentlemen. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. Well, I'll begin with Senator Okajev. Now, it appears as though community policing is now the buzzword, from the police to the Southwest governors, and now the National Assembly promising to pursue it with vigor. And the question will be, what more vigor will the National Assembly be given to community policing that has not been given by the police, the Southwest governors, and as well as other governors that are proposing something like this? What more is the National Assembly bringing to the table?
Well, thank you. Let me start it this way. The Constitution in Section 14, subsection 2B, says that the primary responsibility of government is the welfare and security of its citizenry. That is the premise for which government exists. And so we are an arm of government. The National Assembly is an arm of government, and nobody is denying that we have a big, huge problem on our hands, and that is the problem of insecurity. Away from those days that when you talk about insecurity, you're talking about Boko Haram in the northeast. Now we know that every part of the country is affected. Indeed, the military that is supposed to take care of our external defense are now deployed to at least 30 states across the country. That is an indication clearly that there's something wrong. So the National Assembly cannot be there and close its eyes to all of this. I have been in the National Assembly for quite some time. While we were in the House of Representatives, I was the chairman of Rules and Business. And I can testify that of all the motions that we had, the number one subject on all of those motions was insecurity. In fact, as at the time we left the 8th Assembly, I could count more than 90 motions that were brought pertaining to insecurity. At that time, the National Assembly, that is both the House and the Senate, convoked a National Security Summit and called all the major stakeholders to that meeting, and proposals were made. Even before the summit, the National Assembly, the House of Representatives, where I was then, called all the security chiefs, paramilitary and military, and all of them, and to a meeting that lasted for more than 4 hours. We locked ourselves in and said, let's find a solution to this problem. And they laid out their constraints and all of that, and the promise that if certain things were done, we'll see a difference. Unfortunately, not much of a difference was made. Now I'm in the Senate, and the same thing is continuing. Hardly a week comes up without at least 2 motions on insecurity. Even before I left the floor this morning to attend this program,
Senator Okajev,
2 motions were brought.
I'd like to pause you for a moment, and we'd also like to bring in Mr. Mohammed, especially because there are some who believe that the government is being complacent. But we'll go on this break, and when we return, I'll read a statement which was given out by a member of the House of Representatives from Plateau State, and get Mr. Mohammed's response to that. So let's go back to our conversation around security and community policing. Now we still have with us Senator Emmanuel Okajev, a member of the Nigerian Senate, and Mr. Shehu Mohammed, the Director of Strategic Planning, Buhari Campaign Council. That was during the 2019 elections. Thank you, gentlemen, for your patience. So, Mr. Mohammed, I was going to take you up on a statement which was made by a member of the House of Representatives representing Plateau State, that's Mr. Solomon Marin, saying the government seems not only complacent, but to be condoning these hoodlums and probably protecting them by dealing with the issues with kid gloves. He goes on to say, because there is no single prosecution of those arrested over the years, no categorical statement and policy to fight this menace to the finish. Do you share the sentiments made by Mr. Marin in that statement?
Absolutely not. I think this is just one of those unbelievable, crazy statements, by a lawmaker. He should have never said something like that, because the same Plateau, has been on the limelight since somewhere around in the early 90s, late 80s, in fact, to the early 90s. This is the same community that at one point They stopped a retired major general, murdered him in cold blood, and put him in a well in a village where even when the military were trying to investigate to know whereabouts of this retired, dedicated major general, the people, the women in the area came out en masse to protest when the military officer heading this investigation, Colonel Mohammed, wanted to examine an old well within that particular community. So he shouldn't make that statement. Plateau has been in the news for quite a while. They have had so many problems, herders, farmers. You know, it's a clash that has been going on from time to time. I hope that Nigerians remember Dogon Nahawa and all these places where different ethnic
Just a moment,
groups
Mr. Mohammed. So you have mentioned some of these issues. If you can hear me, Mr. Mohammed, just a moment. Now you have mentioned some of these issues. By the way, I'd like you to be careful with the terms that we use, such as not to insult people on the program. But we're looking at a very present challenge of insecurity in the country, and this is a time that, at least at the National Assembly, there's a consensus that we need to fashion out ways out of this. So let me just take you up on the talk about community policing. It appears as though we're shying away from the conversation around state police. So what do you think will be the thinking of perhaps your party and the presidency regarding state police, especially now that we have some form of regional security forum coming up across the country?
I think it's a welcome development because, I mean, over the period of campaign and over the years, Nigerians have been clamoring for something like this. You localize the policing system, and even the police department, has been trying over the years to come up with modalities and framework within which they could have community policing. Because what you have is, when you have people from a particular community, they know who the criminals are. They will be able to tackle criminals very much well. So I think the National Assembly coming up, to tackle this issue is a welcome development.
Right.
I mean,
so
there is an act that needs to be amended.
Let's bring in Senator Okajev. Just for a moment before we wrap up the conversation. So the bulk is at the table of the National Assembly. You've mentioned a few bills that you say are pending before the Senate regarding security. So I'd like you to elucidate on some of them. Is perhaps state police also one of those?
No, your point of correction, not bills. These are motions that end in resolutions to see that certain things are done in order to ensure that the security and welfare of the people is better protected. Today, like you mentioned in your intro, the National Assembly has a motion on the floor that tends to take a holistic look at the insecurity in the country with a view to trying to, if you recall, last December, the federal government rolled out a strategy to fight corruption. Its ramification. They identified those tendencies that amplify the insecurity in the country. And so one of the things the motion is looking at is what are the modalities for implementing what the federal government itself rolled out last December, and then to set up another committee to liaise with the executive arm of government to ensure that it does not just end at the level of rolling out, as we've had in the past, some of the programs of government. So we implement it because everybody is bothered. So there's a security summit that the Senate President promised too, that will take place in the life of this assembly. It's part of the strategies and the ways from the National Assembly to ensure that this matter is given a good legislative look at from that end of government.
Well, we do hope that all the deliberations end up in fruitful results such that we see better security in the country. But I'd like to thank you so much, Senator Emmanuel Okajev, a member of the Nigerian Senate, and Mr. Shehu Mohammed, the Director of Strategic Planning, Buhari Campaign Council during the 2019 elections. Thank you so much, gentlemen.